Happy New Year, everybody. This is Tom Box, and welcome to 2025. To kick off your 2025, I've got 10 of the best decks that you guys can use to jump off your year. 5 of which are meta choices you guys should be familiar with that spilt over from December, and 5 are rogue choices that you guys have submitted online through your results and voted on through Twitter. You can think of this as everyone's Yu-Gi-Oh! Starting point for 2025. We got main deck, side deck, and even a mini interaction summary just to kind of give you a brief look at what these decks do and why they win. But where will it evolve, and will you cook something up outside of this range? Let me know down in the comment section. Now, speaking of cooking, many of us did a lot of cooking over the holidays, and perhaps it's time to take some time back for yourself, or you made some New Year's resolution to eat healthier and be better to your own body. I know I did both, so I turned to today's video sponsor, Factor. Factor's got you covered, 2 birds with 1 stone. First of all, they take the stress out of meal planning. No more crazy lines at the groceries, and you can get your chef-prepared meal in under 2 minutes. That's a lot of time saved, and they can fulfill your dietary requirements, whether it be keto, calorie smart, protein plus, vegan, vegetarian. They've got your preferences covered. They'll also eliminate the hassle of prepping and cooking your food. Most importantly, you don't have to do so much as the cleanup. Oh my god, over the holidays, the cleanup was just atrocious. It's as simple as heating and eating. Heat and eat and do what you want to do. So start your year right. Factor's got a deal right now. Get 50% off and free shipping on your first box by using my link. Click the link in the description below or scan the QR code with your phone. My code is MST.TV, and of course, thank you Factor for sponsoring today's video. Meta deck number 1, we have Fiend Smith Risal. This is the deck to beat back in December thanks to Triff winning YCS Anaheim with a variant of this deck. Shoutouts to Triff. And what makes this deck super powerful, it synergizes both the Fiend Smith engine with Risal, starting with the Fiend Smith engine, insulating yourself from nib by giving you access to DDD Wave Hiking Caesar, as well as a follow-up into Desiree. So when you get to both of these, you have like Summon Negation that follows up into Omni Negation. It's already really good without even touching the Risal package. And the Risal package is made up of, 12 1-card starters right now? And these 12 1-card starters are also 1-card extenders. They are so powerful. Sure, it locks you into rank 4s, but if you do the Fiend Smith Suffers, it won't really matter. You also have access to Chaos Angel, which makes life even harder for most people. And the package is just so tightly knit that you can run 18 hand traps and just dump hand traps and you have 1-card starter. It's the definition of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! In this one deck. And so, what also makes them really powerful? Detonator, the Drident 2.0, really powerful. Fiend Smith cards being just super versatile, and you have Duo Drive being able to search 2 cards into Risal Cross. I think Risal Cross can't be understated because it's the one that offers you negation, that you get to choose which part of the chain you want to negate in terms of monster effects, as long as you can detach a material off of a Risal Xyz. But weaknesses, it comes with a fair share. It's an Xyz deck, of course, so Book of Eclipse, Ultimate Slayer, and Druid's Worm. Book of Eclipse turns off everything. And then you have Ultimate Slayer, no interaction, turns off your Detonator, turns off your Risal Cross. Pretty big stuff. And then Druid's Worm, because the Detonator can protect against destruction, Druid's Worm does not destroy, and he can take care of that Detonator so that you don't have to deal with a triple pop interaction. But there are also choke points. Now, sure, they insulate themselves from Nibiru, but if you have second hand trap plus Nibiru, you still wipe the entire board. And then there's Fiend Smith Requiem. If you can remove the Fiend Smith Requiem, it forces them to play into the Nibiru. And speaking of which, even a Ghost Ogre can be hit with Nibiru, because all you gotta do is activate Ghost Ogre on a Duo Drive activation. This will force the detaching of the DDD, and therefore the DDD has no more material, so Nibiru can still land. So, that's your advantage, all right? And of course, never let Duo Drive resolve. That's the basics of this deck. This is the deck to beat still, and hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight of why you would play it or how to beat it. Meta deck number 2, we've got Malice. So Kashtira Mouse and Striker Mouse are the 2 top dog variants, and I think Striker Mouse has a higher performance so far thanks to Jib going undefeated in Swiss overall at the YCS Anaheim. So shoutouts to Jib. Now, here's the thing. This deck is very powerful. It's a combo-oriented deck that plays with the Banish, and so it's already kind of playing a little bit more offbeat compared to most other decks. But on top of that, because they can run Shifter, this is kind of the deck that's kind of gatekeeping most of the other rogue decks from playing, because Shifter is still in the format. But in terms of comboing, if this deck combos through your very first hand trap, they're still going to end on essentially the same end board minus like 1 or 2 cards in their hand. And the full end board is a bunch of layered interaction from banishing your cards, banishing your stuff from the graveyard, negating your cards on the field, and they're just all over the place. They're in the graveyard, they're in the back row, and because they're trap cards that can activate immediately, there's almost very little you can do against them in terms of like matching their timing. So that's what makes them so strong. They also play with the Bestial package to kind of kick things off, and sometimes you see a Coda Soul in there, and that Coda Soul somehow turns into another Link monster, and it just goes wild from there. But they do have significant weaknesses thanks to, well, the banish based playstyle. This is why Artifact Lancia is in the format. It's a complete blowout card. Nibiru, because they need to summon so many times, it's a Link based deck, so that also kind of shuts them down. And then there's also Chaos Hunter, which there's very little answer to. Some people are choosing to main deck Book of Eclipse, main decking the Infinite Impermanence, and maybe adding a Widow Anchor in there just so they can turn off this problematic monster, because if they don't, they really can't play. I guess I kind of forgot to mention like how they kind of end you. They just use Access Code Talker, because a lot of these monsters, when they're banished, they summon themselves back out, including the Link monsters. And so if they banish one of the level 3 Link monsters, they'll pop your card and they'll summon another big beater. And that makes life really, really difficult, and that's almost lethal just from that point. Choke points, there isn't so many choke points in there. You need like a double hand trap scenario just to shut them off. One would be like if they go normal summon Dormouse, you can technically Ghost Ogre the Haggard Lizardoise just so that they don't have the right material. But if they extend through that, you're still looking at a full end board. That's one thing. If you can find some way to negate GWC on your turn, like with a Ghost Bell, that's what actually works out a lot better, because you kind of don't let them get to the White Binder. White Binder kind of sets off this chain reaction to a bunch of stuff being summoned. So yeah, that's it for the Striker Malice, or Malice in general. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of introductory. It's not about what you can do to them, but how you do it against them and the timing you use against them. Meta deck number 3, we have Fiend Smith Kashtira. I don't think I need to dwell too long into this deck, because this is just Fiend Smith mashed with Kashtira. Kashtira is still like, oh, they're just really strong monsters. They have some of the best removals in the game. They can take out your stuff in your extra deck, and now they're paired with Fiend Smith, using that as the control engine as well as the aggressive engine to keep pushing and applying pressure. That's essentially it, because Fiend Smith is so versatile that it handles most of the interaction, plus a bunch of hand traps. You pretty much have it made, and they can also play Dominus Purge. There's just so many ways that you can just win with just one side of the engine with a ton of hand traps, and this is what this deck is taking advantage of. And ironically, you can use Shifter to kind of disable the Fiend Smith engine, making the Kashtira engine much more manageable, because Kashtira engine is one of the more fragile engines. If you take out the Birth, well, that's kind of the end of that engine for the most part. And then you can use Druid Swarm to kind of take out the Requiem so that they can't build into the negation against summons, and then you can drop a Nibiru on them, and then again, it's kind of like the same weaknesses as previously. Choke points, it's got to be the Requiem. That's what they play, multiple copies of Requiem. Lacrima, you got to block that from getting the additional follow-up, because they can dump Fiend Smith in Paradise, and if you have Crossout Designator, you can trade it with the hand traps, because it's a hand trap based deck with a bunch of good monsters. Meta deck number 4, Pure Fiend Smith, piloted by Joshua Schmidt. I guess it's Fiend Schmidt according to his video. So what's so powerful about this deck? I don't think I really need to talk about Fiend Smith anymore, but you guys can see a pattern. Fiend Smith was dominating last year. It's still going to be dominating at the beginning of this year. Hopefully we see some changes in that direction, but ultimately it's still a very powerful package. And aside from just being able to just capitalize on your Fiend Smith monster using Agnum Day to kind of cycle your Desirees, and sending it to the graveyard, because it's a quite easy link body to kind of climb up to and revive your copy of Desiree. There's a lot of other interactions, such as, well, a ton of hand traps, and you should always line up your magical musket monsters just so that you can get the additional light fiend monsters so that you can fuse into the correct monsters or perform the correct link play against your opponent. If you guys want to watch the YCS Anaheim stream, you can kind of get a glimpse of what the deck can do by watching some of Josh's games. On the other hand, in terms of weaknesses, Abyss Dweller shutting down the entirety of the graveyard, it hurts a lot, and same with Dimension Shifter, because there's no graveyard to be played with, and Bestial Druid Swarm to take away the Requiem, take away, not even just Requiem, but even Lacrima to some degree, can make your turns a whole lot easier, because nowadays everyone's sending Fiend Smith in Paradise into the graveyard and dumping into the graveyard the Fiend Smith Desiree to send another card into the graveyard. So there's a lot of interaction. It's a control-based deck after all, with a crazy combo engine that's kind of attached to it. And then deck number 5, we have Purerisal. It's a separate deck. We know what it does, so I'm not going to go into the details of it, but if you can't afford Fiend Smith, then this is probably the meta deck you should be going for, because it's actually not that expensive to go into this deck anymore, as the pull rates have shown from Crossover Breaker. Hey, if you let us pull most of these ultra rare cards, we can build this, and it became a lot more affordable after since. So aside from that, it's the detonator plays. It has a little bit more of an exceed based play that you can use to kind of insulate your board, such as, you know, Photon Blast Dragon, Tornado Dragon, and you can pivot into the Baguska just in case you get, you know, stunned out by certain cards, and you still have access to Chaos Angel, because a lot of people are choosing to main deck the Bestial Duoswarm as one of their key hand traps over Effect Failure. So that's essentially it for the meta decks. Let's go into some of the juicier decks, the Rogue decks. Rogue deck number 1, let's take a bit of a breather from our Fiend Smith. We can look at Atlantean Mermail. This water deck is only going to get stronger post Supreme Darkness as they get even more support, but looking at it right now, it's still a very powerful deck nonetheless. It's one that if you face off against it, you better hope that you win the die roll, because they have Minstrel to rip out hand traps out of your hand so they can get that quick check. But if they can't stop your Molchami Furlos, it's going to be all for naught anyway, because they do special summon a lot from the extra deck, and that's going to load your hand with a ton of cards, potentially even enough to break the board. Now, what makes the deck so strong? Double Totally Awesome is one thing. The other thing is Atlantean Prince Start is already ridiculously strong. They have a multiple starting points in the deck, but in terms of follow-up, it's not like it's a one card follow-up. A lot of these follow-ups require some level of discarding to kind of kick it off, which is why it's not at that, you know, tier 1 spot, the top tier of the meta, because top tier meta right now is one card combo, plus the follow-ups are also one card, and they're the exact same card, and that's kind of what makes them super consistent. This one used to be in that range, not so much anymore. In terms of weaknesses, Drone Lockbird, this deck searches a lot because you get multiple searches for the Atlantean Dragoons. Shifter shuts down the deck entirely. Furalos just summons so much out of the extra deck. It's one of those banes. If you can't stop it, you might actually have to end your turn. Some people just choose to go through it anyway because they think, hey, if I can negate 4 cards and a lot of these cards are once per turn, I might still have it, so they might choose to go in. Choke points. The Marine says Coral Anemone. You can ogre that card and then they don't get the summon. They also lose the body, so that actually sets them really, really far behind. If you can stop the Mermail Shadow Squad from summoning out the monster, that's also very, very strong because they lose a discard outlet along the way. Usually that monster that gets summoned is going to be the Mermail Abyss Pike, and Abyss Pike is the one that kind of dumps another card and eventually leads into the first Bahamut Shark, which is totally awesome. And you can also negate the Deep Sea King Coelacanth. If you can negate that, that also prevents another Toad from coming out, and that's 2 additional bodies that you don't have to answer to because they're going to start link climbing into the Mermail package. And sometimes one of the other key plays, Zelantis, they lock themselves into water and then they Zelantis you, and then you lose every single monster because you cannot special summon anything but water monsters, and you probably don't have any. So that's gotta be one of the limitations, all right? Rogue choice number 2, we have Tenp Dragon. They've definitely fallen from the sky, but not as worse as Snake Eye. Snake Eye definitely dropped even further below. But in terms of like what's in the deck now, of course, they lost the 2 Chundras and the 2 Kaimans, making them much more fragile. And due to that limitation, they can't play D-Shifter anymore because losing Chundra kind of loses the game. One of the key weaknesses against this deck, and I kind of don't mention the weakness, is that you just go SP, banish the Chundra, and it's game over. For the most part, they have to learn to use Genroku to perform those synchro summons, but I'm not saying that it's bad because it still gets you an OTK. But again, these are 1 card OTKs. They took away 2 of their 1 card OTK, the follow-up and whatnot, and therefore they dropped significant ranks down into the Rogue tier, and they're still seeing tops in regionals. They're just not really winning outright anymore at the regional level. It's just part of what it is. You know, you hit their consistency, they're going to take a lot of damage. Other lifelines in the deck now, they shoved in the Cash Tier package. Some people have shoved in the Fiend Smith package just to keep them going and just to keep it alive. Of course, they are a going second deck. A lot of them have opted into playing Ultimate Slayers to deal with the Risal, and sometimes to deal with the Malice. If they have a Terahertz, you can see people playing Ultimate Slayer to throw the Tri-Brigade rating 5 to dump Garura to get the additional draw to really just help push through the board. That's what they're capable of doing. They're board breaker, they can still win. They're still 1 card OTK. Weaknesses, D-Barrier, Ghost Bell, Ash, these are all the same. Making them go first really sucks for them. That's like almost a choke point in its own right. And of course, don't let the Biden Dragon summon itself back out, and you'll be good to go. And Rogue deck number 3, Fiend Smith Ubel. So essentially they're using the Fiend Smith engine to set up the Ubel stuff, and it's been the world champion deck thanks to Ruben. Shout out to Ruben for winning the world championship with Ubel, and it's really strong even now, even though there isn't like 3 Phantom Ubel, and that was the most annoying aspect of that deck, getting their cake and eat it too. They can have the monster effect change and use the body for something else. It was pretty wild for them to have something like that crazy, but what makes it more interesting now is that now they have 3 copies of Opening the Spirit Gates, which lets them kind of pivot back to the older version of the Dark Beckoning Beast package, and they're mixing in Kashtira cards in there just to kind of facilitate additional removal. But overall, this deck is still extremely powerful. The end boards are more or less still unbreakable. I've tried to play against it before. It is very difficult. If they get their full setup, it's harder to break through because everything is layered in a way that is already kind of annoying. You try to battle, they have Spirit of Ubel acting as a hand trap to kind of chump block you. You can suddenly just lose because there's Nightmare Pain and you left a monster on the field, and they have the ability to link away your stuff going into SP. They can negate your stuff with Verudris. They have access to so many things that make things so difficult that this is still one of those decks that will survive for a while. And if you still have the deck and you don't want to invest into the modern meta, this is still a really good choice. Rogue deck number 4, we have Memento Tolin. Okay, I'm gonna be brutally honest with you guys. I have no idea what this deck does. This is essentially the Cardian. Do you guys know what Cardians do? 95% of us do not know what Cardians do, but it's essentially that for me. I did not bother reading these cards. They do a lot of destruction. They do a lot of add from grave. They do a lot of this and that. I'm just going to read Nishi's notes here because I'm just going to embarrass myself from this point forward. So they're a graveyard reliant deck that cycles through a lot of the names into the graveyard by destroying cards. They have lots of destruction based triggers, and the best way to deal with them is you throw a shifter on them, and that essentially skips their entire turn because they need to recover stuff out of the graveyard and put stuff back from the grave into the deck. Okay, that's cool. Never let the Memento Tolin Twin Dragon resolve because it's like a multiple card add. It's a powerhouse card, adds multiple cards, and when it's destroyed, it also does a special summon, I believe. But 1-card combo, they've got the Anguish and Darkblade that can set the whole thing up, and you don't really want the Tatsuno Hogoshigo, the Seahorse, from going off because it also loads the graveyard 2 cards. And Gactic is another card that you want to prevent because it adds a card from graveyard back into hand, and that actually is pretty dangerous because there's a lot of cards that can summon on destruction once it's added to hand, and that's what really cycles the entire thing into action. One thing you can stop with Ghost Spell is Memento Tolin Fusion. A lot of people don't recognize this, but apparently it's one of the things that you can use to stop it. Okay, well, that's all I have for this one. And for the 5th and final rogue deck in this list, we have Labyrinth. This is a deck that managed to get 2nd place at regionals in San Diego, a 600-person regional, so it's no easy feat by any means. And among all the Risals and the Malices, taking 2nd place, congratulations, Kai. This is a build similar to your build, except that the extra deck is obviously very different because you ran the Chimera package, just so that you can deal with the Maximus, but that never happened. But there is one note to make here that's from your package. It's going to be the Entis without a Dogmatica punishment. It's just there to bait the Unicorn. As you said, you just bait out certain cards, and so you don't have to lose other key cards because you do play Extravagance in the deck, so you need to double up on a lot of names. Now, looking at this deck, you might be wondering, where are the hand traps? Well, why play hand traps when you got areas to activate legitimate trap cards to completely blow out your opponent with the double D-Berry? If you hit Trap Trick into D-Berry, that also works out. You can hit the Daruma Karma Cannon to flip everything face down. No Xyz play, no Link plays. Makes it a whole lot easier to play. And on top of that, you can also use some of the furniture to kind of pre-set up some of this stuff so you can load them into graveyard and eventually add them back into your hand, giving you the perfect tempo against a lot of these opponents. And seeing that this got 2nd place gives me a lot of hope, seeing that these rogue decks are doing very well, topping events, almost winning out events straight up. Very impressive. Now, this is not a combo based deck, but just remember some of the things they can do. Big Welcome into Lovely can rip a card out of your hand or destroy a card on the field. Trap Trick can set up any trap card. It's very dangerous, and always use your Ash and Bells for the welcomes, and that usually makes life a whole lot easier. But one thing that you should always chain to 100%, Lady Labyrinth. Never let Lady Labyrinth get the card straight from the deck because it's always going to be a blowout card. And really, that's it for the list here. And those are the only decks you need to care about. I'm just kidding, there's a whole list of honorable mentions here. White Forest Centurion Rescue Ace, Thunder Dragon Horus, Goblin Biker to Anti-Risal, Voiceless Voice Ritual Beast, Branded Fire Kings, and Mimighouls. These are all decks capable of taking top spots at events and perhaps even winning some. So I wish you all the best of luck in your 2025 Yu-Gi-Oh endeavors. All right, you know, get your first top, get your first win, whatever the goals that you have set for yourselves. I wish you the best of luck in achieving that. You know, hit that thumbs up button if you guys enjoyed this video, smash subscribe, ding that notification bell, check out our sponsor Factor 75, and I will see you all in the next one.